Hello, dear BCO family. My name is Audrey Wright, and I am the Concertmaster of the Baltimore Chamber Orchestra. I hope this video finds you well. I hope that you have been staying safe and healthy and listening to lots of music during these very trying times. Now, in this video, I will be presenting a performance I recently recorded of an arrangement I did of the second movement of Johann Sebastian Bach's Violin Concerto in A minor. This is an arrangement for 5 violins. I, in fact, recorded all parts myself, being that I'm here in my home studio in Baltimore. And it's been quite a fun experiment for me to work on. It's been comforting and very meditative for me as well. So I hope you enjoy this performance of the second movement of Bach's A minor concerto, and please stick around towards the end of the video. I'll be talking a little bit more about the piece in depth and explaining a little bit about my process for actually recording this video. I hope you enjoy. I hope you enjoyed that performance as much as I enjoyed working on it and recording it. Now, this is a piece of music that I absolutely love. It's something that I learned when I was a child, as many violinists do. It's kind of one of the earlier violin concertos that we learn. But as we mature and become professional musicians, it's so amazing to revisit this music because it is incredibly profound and it really speaks to the soul. And I absolutely love this second movement. It's my favorite movement of this whole concerto. It actually was a piece I was supposed to perform back in early April of this year, and so it was kind of a real disappointment for me not to be able to perform it because of the pandemic situation. So when I was thinking of something to record for you all to listen to at home in this setting, I immediately thought of this piece because of how much I was looking forward to playing it, and because of how comforting the music is and how meditative it is. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about where this piece came from and how Bach came to compose this incredible music. Now, the A minor violin concerto was one of only 2 violin concertos that Bach composed, that we know of at least. Of course, there's the very famous double violin concerto that he also wrote, but this is only the second in 2 concertos that he wrote for one solo violin. So it's pretty special in that sense. It was written, we believe, sometime between 1717 and 1723, when Bach was living in Cöthen and serving as the Kapellmeister, where he was kind of director of music for the court there. Now, we think that it was written during that time because these were years where Bach was writing some of his most beloved instrumental music. He wrote the Brandenburg concertos, the violin concertos, just a lot of instrumental music because the prince of the court there was very, very encouraging of Bach to write kind of this music that he wanted to write. He wasn't being kind of told to write sacred music, cantatas, like he would later do in Leipzig, and as he had been doing already before. So he was kind of free. Bach was free to really compose this music that he wanted to compose, music that he could even play himself. So this was a very fruitful period for him in terms of composing music. And this piece is a real kind of wonderful showcase of different styles. Now, Bach was very interested in the kind of flashy Italian concerto in the style that Vivaldi was writing at that time. And of course, Vivaldi was writing not 2 violin concertos, but hundreds, right? So I think Bach drew inspiration from that Italian Vivaldi style of writing, where there's a lot of virtuosic playing going on. But of course, Bach always stays true to himself, and so we also hear that very kind of Germanic contrapuntal language in the writing as well. And so as a result, the whole piece is a real beautiful balance of expressions and of style. And it seems just incredibly balanced, like you're never wanting more of one thing or another. Bach gives you exactly what you're wanting in every single moment. So the second movement of this concerto is the slow movement of the piece. Now, the first and third movements of the concerto are rather lively, very kind of technically flashy, especially the third movement. But the second movement is much more inward. It's very spiritual, it's reflective, and it's simple. The line, the musical line, even in the solo part, sings, but in a very kind of inward way, as if, Bach is expressing a prayer in music. So this movement is just incredibly beautiful, and that's why I chose to record it. It's something that has been comforting to me in the past few weeks. So I was very excited to kind of dive into it and figure out how I could arrange it for multiple violin parts and record it. Now, I thought I'd talk a little bit about my process for recording this. Of course, this is not the original arrangement that Bach composed. Of course, originally we would have had a few more strings in the kind of tutti section. There would have been a continuo part comprising of a keyboard instrument, most likely a harpsichord, and some other bass instrument such as a cello. So when I was going through this music, I really had to look at the score and figure out what changes needed to be made so that I could successfully reinterpret it for violin only. Now, I was able to maintain almost all of the original kind of notes. I made some changes in the bass and viola parts in terms of register. So of course, I'm not able to play as low of a register as Bach originally intended with this music, and especially the bass part. But I think in the arrangement that I came up with, I was able to give the impression at least of a rather full texture, and using the lower portion of the violin, the lower register of the violin, to try to make up for the kind of bassy texture that would have been part of the original composition. Now, like I said, I started by kind of looking at the score and kind of transcribing this music for violin parts. It came out to 5 different violin parts, including the solo. And how I recorded this was I first had to make a kind of foundation track, almost like a click track, where I played through using the bass part, but with some added rhythmic texture to kind of help establish a real rhythmic structure for the whole piece. So where there were rests, for example, I would kind of add in continuous notes to give me an idea of what the tempo needed to be and what the timing needed to be, so that I could take rubato, and I didn't want to use a metronome, for example, to stick to a very specific beat and play all these tracks on top of. So I made my own kind of click track, if you will, and that included all of the rubato kind of free timing that I wanted to incorporate into the solo part for when I played that later. So I made that first track, and after recording that, I would listen to that track through a pair of earphones, and I would then record each of the tracks in the arrangement, each part. I would record each of those separately. So I started with the actual bass part, and then I did it again with the solo part, and then with the other string parts, so on and so on. So then at the end of all of this, I had 5 separate tracks that I was happy with that represented all of the 5 violin parts for the whole piece. And what I did was I imported all of this into a program called ScreenFlow. Now there are various programs out there for kind of compiling videos and compiling multiple tracks into something where you can, hear multiple parts being played at the same time and watch the video. Another one is Adobe Premiere, I believe. But ScreenFlow is a program that actually my husband uses a lot for his work, and he's a real whiz at making incredible videos. So he helped me kind of figure out how to put all of these tracks together and arrange the videos in a way that was kind of visually pleasing and made sense. It takes a lot of patience to sync up, especially all of this audio, because you have to rely on kind of visual cues. You're looking at the audio track visually in the program, and you're also heavily relying on your ears. But it gets down to such precise detail that it takes a little bit of time to do this and to sync it up properly. So with a little bit of help from my husband and a lot of patience, I was able to put all of these parts together into one kind of cohesive recording. And in that way, it kind of represents what I like to think of as almost like a DJ track. Something that a DJ would do is kind of layer multiple musical tracks on top of each other to make something new. And in a way, that's what I was doing with this piece. And so, finally, it leads me to just think about, this is music that was written around 300 years ago. There's such a tradition, especially with playing music by composers like Bach. And, I think it's really interesting to think of this music in a totally new concept. And, it's a little funny to be playing a piece like this with 5 violins and, you're recording yourself 5 different times and putting it all together. It's certainly new and different, but, we have to remember that Bach was an incredible innovator. He was one of the most amazing innovators and, inventors of his time in terms of his music. And I think if Bach were here in our time in 2020 and kind of dealing with the scenario that we're dealing with now in the world, he's sitting at home and he's not able to go out and make music for his coffee houses or whatever court he was working for at the time. I'm sure he would have had amazing recording equipment, and I think he would have looked at the music that he already had written and I think he would have said, I think I'll arrange this for multiple parts on the same instrument. And I think he would have embraced this kind of new way of approaching music that has really come about because we are adapting to our surroundings and we're adapting to the world around us. So it's certainly a new way of playing this music, and it's certainly a new way of watching this music as an audience member. But I think the composer himself, Bach, would have totally approved of this. And for me, at least, it has been an absolute comfort and joy to work on this music and bring it to you in as full of a form as I am possibly able at this point. So I hope you enjoyed listening to the second movement of Bach's A minor concerto, and I hope that you were able to learn a little bit of something about the music in my words about it after the fact. And I look forward to making music in person and sharing music with you more in the future. And until then, stay safe and keep listening to as much music as possible. It really is what's going to get us through these trying times.